All right, hello, it's me, Mike, with HPDS. I'll be doing a study in Genesis 32 in this episode. So before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. May your kingdom come, and may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Please give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our debt, as we forgive those in debt to us. And Lord, lead us not into temptation, but instead deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom of power and glory, Lord, forever and ever. Amen. All right, so I'll be reading through Genesis 32 here in a moment. And before I do, I'll go ahead and read through like my little notes. Basically, in verses 1 and 2, we're going to see that Jacob is going to meet with God's angels at a place called Mahanaim. And then we got verses 3 to 8. We'll see that Jacob sends a message to his brother Esau. And then verses 9 through 12, we're going to see that Jacob prays for deliverance from his brother Esau. And then in verses 13 through 23, we're going to see that Jacob sends a present to Esau. And then verses 24 to 32, we're going to see that Jacob's name is changed to Israel. So if you remember Genesis 31, it was the situation in when Jacob flees Laban. So he kind of gets away from Laban's camp, and Rachel steals an idol from Laban's household, and then of course Laban chases after him, and God comes to Laban in a dream, and basically they make up and they make a covenant together, and they're in a spot. And I remember I couldn't really find it, but I think I did find it. I was concerned about where they were at, but here's that mitzvah. And that mitzvah was where they ended up making the covenant. Oops, I'm in all sorts of different. Here you go. 31. Let's see. So let me go ahead, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and get back into the. I'll go ahead and get back into the. I lost my pen. Great. Hold on. One moment. Boom. Yeah, I made it back. Got my pen, everybody. By the way, if you're watching, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel. And keep up as I Bible study through the Bible, chapter at a time. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. I'll read it, and then I'll get back into these notes and get back into speaking about what's going on here. So we're reading into chapter 32, and I'll read it right now. And it is the King James Version. Always remember that. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, "Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau, thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now. And I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants. And I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in thy sight." And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. And he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds and the camels, into 2 bands, and said, If Esau can come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidst unto me, Return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies of all the truth and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become two bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. And he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she goats and 20 he goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 kine and 10 bulls, 20 she asses and 10 foals. And he delivered them into the hand of his servant, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, Pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, When Esau my brother meeteth thee and asketh thee, saying, Whose art thou, and whither goest thou, and whose are these before these? Then thou shalt say, They be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the droves, saying, On this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when ye find him, and say ye moreover, Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face, peradventure he will accept of me. So I went to the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, and he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of that place Peniel. For I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Penuel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. So that was Genesis 32. Genesis 32. So what was it? It's a kind of decent length of a chapter. It's about 32 verses long. And let's go ahead one more time. I'll read through this. We're going to see Jacob meets with God's angels at the very beginning in Manaheim. And we're going to see that Jacob sends a message to his brother Esau. So he's going to send his message. And remember from previous chapters, before when 20 years earlier, what had happened between these two brothers. Basically, Jacob here had stolen the birthright, and he had stolen the blessing from his brother Esau, and Esau was talking about trying to kill him. And that's why Jacob's mother, Rebecca sent him off in the first place, to her brother Laban's house to get a wife for him and kind of stay over there for a little while. And for a little while, it turned into 20 years. Now it's 20 years later. He's coming back, and so he's still kind of concerned, though. In fact, he's very afraid. He's very, very afraid. He thinks his brother just might kill everybody, or he might just be attacked. So he doesn't know what's going to happen. And so he comes up with a little plan. And his little plan is, well, I'll separate the camps into different encampments, and I'll send them in droves one at a time. And, if he comes in and he attacks the first drove, well, then, you know, at least the next droves will be able to run away and escape. So that's kind of what his plan is. He kind of shows some favoritism. You'll see that he puts um, Leah's children, Leah's boys, his basically his eldest sons, if you think about it, most of his eldest sons, he puts them on the front lines. He puts Leah's children up in the front. He puts Leah and her encampment up in the front. Then he puts Rachel behind her. Well, he puts the servants up front, I guess, before that. But nonetheless, he does. He is putting these children. He's kind of making it known which are his favorite encampments, and he puts them up front, the least favorite encampments. So once again, I made mention in some of the other videos that these guys are not like Jesus Christ. These guys, they're living a hard life. They're living a type of life that we know of and see even into this day that still exists. And these kinds of lifestyles are led in, polygamy camps, cultish camps, distributors of pornography. We even see them in elite circles in the military, and we see them also in high up in the government, in these secret societies and so forth. In higher education, it's very prevalent there too. But of course, that's a different video for a different channel. Meanwhile, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'll go ahead and get back into it, and we'll go line by line, and we'll see what the Holy Spirit brings to mind in this particular chapter. So let me get it right. Oh, I always check. There it goes. We're going. So here he is right off the bat. There's something going on where Jacob meets some angels. So he's going on his way. So now Laban and him are they've made peace. I was having problems finding where they were at when they made peace. But you see here that there's a town called Mitzpah. So this is where they were, out in Mitzpah. It's a little kind of close to Damascus, close to this area named Dan. That's where it seems to be. I think I find other places. Yeah, so it's even right here. So it was quite a bit. I was saying he was kind of out this Gilead in one of the last videos. But Mitzpah is right there too. So you can see where Mitzpah is. And so this is kind of showing a good area of what, Israel actually, I think, goes all the way up to here. I'm not really sure. I'd have to take a look at current maps to see what Israel currently looks like, but it seems to be quite a bit. But so anyway, so they're over here, and he's talking about he meets these angels of God. And so when he called them, he calls this place Mahanaim. So now he's somewhere else. Now he's at Mahanaim. So let's see if we can find that. And here it is. There it is right there. Mahanaim. And so he kind of comes a little bit south from this Mitzpah. So this is where he left off in the last chapter, in this Mitzpah place, where that's where there was some sort of a stone, a boundary stone. So you can see that there's a boundary placed around here. And this boundary is the boundary that the Syrians over here, people from Laban, and Laban's people and from Haran, they say they will not come into, they'll respect that boundary line, and that's the boundary line. And so now he's come into his home country, and he's down here at this Mahanaim, and he has these angels visit him. The angels of God meet him here. It's another physical encounter. And so we're going to see a couple of physical encounters here with Jacob. Here's some angels, and he calls that place Mahanaim, and that's where he's at when he sees God's angels over there. And so for when Jacob saw that. So this is, here's another thing. He's seeing every time he's seeing God all over the place, and God's angels and proof of God. So God at this point in history is definitely showing Himself to these chosen people of Abraham, and coming up from Noah as well, and so forth. So He's really showing Himself to a few people, not to everybody in the world, but He's showing Himself to this Jacob for sure. And of course, people who come in contact with Jacob also see God occasionally, like as we've seen with Laban. Laban had that dream as well. God came to him in a dream, even though he was not necessarily knowing what God. He was kind of a believer of many gods, is what it seems to be, because he was an idolater. That's what that last story was about. But so anyway, so then it just kind of cuts away from that, and it tells the next portion of the story that Jacob here sends messengers to his brother Esau. Because remember, like I was mentioning, we left off 20 years earlier between these two brothers, where Jacob had stolen the birthright, and he had stolen the uh, the blessing from his brother Esau over here. And so Esau was trying to kill him. He was mad. But 20 years later, he's still concerned that he's gonna kill me. Oh no, what if he's gonna kill me? So he sends the messengers to find out, right? And he says, tell him to, be real nice to him, and tell him to speak like this. Your servant Jacob, so, calling him, he's being real humble, saying, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now. So he's letting him know who he is, because he's coming into this, and he's got a lot of stuff coming with him. So, of course, these people, Edom, Esau and Edom, if you notice, this Esau he's the founder of Edom. So when they use Esau, Edom is kind of his country. And Edom, I think we see maps of that. I can grab maps of that. Let me see what kind of maps I got of that. Let's see. You can see the Edomites down here. So he's coming. Where is he? If we take a look at these other maps again, you see the Edomites kind of in that Southland area. So here we see him he's in the Manaheim, right? So he sends word down through the South Country into Edom. So he sends some messengers down, and you can see where he's at. He's up here just north of this Dead Sea over here, the Salt Sea. He's north of this Salt Sea up here, and that's in this map. That's where he's at. You can see the Edomites. This map shows the Edomites, and you see that. So he's just around right here somewhere. And he's kind of where the territory of the Amorites, it looks like, around the Canaanites and the Amorites. And so he sends messengers down to the Edomites, and the Edomites come back with a message from Esau. So that's what he tells them. He tells them, go ahead and tell them who I am. Tell them that I'm Jacob. I've been with Laban for 20 years now. And I have oxen, I have asses, I have flocks, and men servants and women servants. And I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find grace in thy sight. So he's telling them, I've come, I went with Laban. Now I've come back, and look what I've got. I've got a bunch of stuff. And I'm hoping to find favor in your sight. You're my brother Esau. So he's really saying that. And so the messenger returned to Jacob saying, yeah, we went to your brother Esau, and now he's coming to meet you. But he's kind of got 400 men with him. So he's real concerned right here. And Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. So he was thinking that he's obviously Esau sending like an army with him. Like it's an army of men. And if you remember, this is definitely part of that blessing that Abraham bestowed upon him. And I want to say, what was that? Was that back in chapter 25? When he ends up blessing Esau, and he's telling him he's going to live by the fatness of the land, but he's also going to live by the sword. And so here he is already demonstrating. I mean, he comes out to meet his brother, and he just basically brings an army of men with him. That's his deal. He's just running around with an army all the time. So he's got 400 men. And so Jacob was still really afraid. He does not know the intentions of Esau. And he divides the people that was with him, and the flocks and the herds and the camels, into two bands. So you see he starts dividing the people. And then he says, so that's why he says, if Esau comes to the one, at least the other one will escape, right? So that's what he's really thinking about it. And Jacob said, "Oh God of my father Abraham." So here he begins to pray. We get into this verse 9. So from 3 to 8, verses 3 to 8 is Jacob sending a message. And then we're going to get to these verses, the next few verses from 9 to 12, where, Jacob is going to be praying for deliverance. So he really prays. He's so afraid of his life and all the life of everybody that's with him. And he's really, he's really getting that fear of God, because what did God tell him to do? God told him to go, and now he's telling him to come back, and he's saying he's going to be with them. And as far as Jacob can tell, it looks like his life is in danger right now. And so he prays, he gets down, and he, once again, being very humble. Jacob being a very humble guy right now. And he prays to God, my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, the Lord, you're the Lord that told me to return unto thy country. You're the one that told me to come back here to my people, and that you would deal with me. And so that you're the one telling me that you would be with me and you would deal with me with my family over here. And I know I'm not worthy of all the mercies. I know I'm not worthy of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have showed unto your servant. So I'm not worthy of anything you give me, not your mercy and your truth, though, is in particular, is what he mentions. I'm not worthy of your mercies, and I'm not worthy of your truth, which you have showed me. Basically, his servant, God's servant. You've showed me the mercies and truth. And he says, for with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I become two bands. And he's saying, look at the truth, and your mercy makes it possible for him to cross over this river Jordan with a whole group of people and a whole group of animals and become two bands. So basically, he's able to control these two groups of people uh, with God's help, because he sees the mercies, and he's shown the mercies, and he's shown the truth that God has. And so this is something to notice, because a lot of people, I've said in other videos, like they kind of try to make science its own religion, and science is really just learning stuff from observation and experimentation, and that's just a word that people have appropriated for what we do in everyday life. And for example, you get used to doing something over and over and over again. So this guy was dealing with sheep and cattle, and he was dealing with servants and so forth. So he had men servants and women servants, and he had all these people under his command. And so every day Jacob was out there doing stuff. He was a leader of this group, and now he's got two groups. He's able to divide them. And what he's saying is, I'm so skilled in everyday life because of the mercies and of the truth that I know come from you, God. So he's really saying that I've learned by what I've learned, and you have made me smart, and you've made me being able to watch and do everything around me. That's why, if you think about it, he was understanding in the last chapter how, if we go back to chapter 31, when he's talking about these different things that he did. Actually, I believe it might have been chapter 30, right? Yeah, chapter 30. I guess it could have been chapter 30, where he would separate the lambs, and he would put these rods in the gutters, and he would place them and make them so where he was basically protecting the sheep, the young of the cattle. He was protecting the cattle's young. That's what he was doing, and he was making it easy for the men to just go ahead, and the male to just go ahead and mount the females, is what he was doing. He was really making it easy for the cattle and the sheep to mate, and he was protecting the mothers and the females when they were giving birth, and that's what he was doing, and that's what he's thanking God for. I'm thanking God for this knowledge and this. You've been kind to me. You've been merciful to me. Laban could have killed me there. Esau could have killed me in the past. All kinds of things could have happened to me, but you've been merciful to me. And that's what he's acknowledging, and also the truth. And he's saying, and also apparently I'm the only guy that can tell that when these cattle need to have babies, you got to protect them, because if you don't protect them, the wolves are gonna come out and they're gonna pick them off one by one. He'd seen it because I'm the one out here seeing when these wild animals come, and who knows, maybe bears come out too. I don't really know what would be eating them, but all kinds of things out there, I'm sure. Just like in this world, cattle, they'll come eat them. Though if you're not paying attention, it happens even here in Colorado, a whole many thousands of miles away. Um, but so that's what he's acknowledging in his prayer, because he knows that his prayer is being heard by God, because he's heard God and he's seen God and he's come across God physically enough times to know also that this guy is powerful enough to be heard and to hear you from a distance, wherever it is that he may be. That's what Jacob is dealing with right here. That's what he recognizes as his God, and that's why he wouldn't make a covenant upon the name of any. He wouldn't swear by any other God's name when he made this uh, down here, when he makes his covenant with Laban back in chapter 31. It's the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor. That's the one that they swear by. You get what I'm saying? Laban had different. It looks like Laban had different gods he could have sworn by. He could have sworn by this other god or this other god, but Jacob wouldn't do it. It was only on this God that we share, the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, which is both of their fathers. Basically, we're from our lineage, and so that was the one that even Laban was able to set upon, because he's like, you know what? That's one of the gods that I know of. Yes, so I can swear by that God, apparently. And so Laban was an idolater, and that's how we're seeing that. But Jacob knows that, no, my God is really powerful. This guy can hear me. This God can hear me, and and he talks to me from a distance. So that's why he's telling him, and he recognizes that the truth in his head comes from this God. Everything he's going on in his mind comes from this God, and he's seen God enough times and heard him enough times to know that. And so he's telling me, I hope that you deliver me from my brother, because I fear him, lest he comes and smite me and the mother with the children. So he's really expecting Esau to just kill everybody. And he says, and if you do save me, then I will surely do thee good and make thy seed as the sand of the sea. So he's really doing this thing where he's praying for his life. I pray, God, that, that my thievery from this man, from my brother in the past, he's repenting for stealing from his brother. So while he's there and he's thinking about it over the night, so he comes, he gets some stuff, and he's like, you know what? On top of this prayer, I'm going to go ahead and send a bunch of stuff to my brother as a present. So this is also, not only is it a gift, it's really he's setting a buffer between his brother and him, so he can send all these goats and he could see what happens to the people, and he could find out, maybe if he starts attacking this group of people with these goats and everything, it'll give him some extra warning, so he's thinking both like a military, because we still have two different nations coming together. And we do remember what was Isaac's blessing was, that Esau and Edom are basically going to serve Israel over here. They're going to serve Israel, and they're going to be servants to Israel. And then they're going to break off their yoke when he gets tired of it or something, eventually. And they're going to live by the sword. So he's really concerned about this. He's, maybe wondering that he doesn't want to live under him like that. But he sends them some goats, and he sends a lot. So think about this: 200 she goats, 20 he goats. So 200 she goats, 20 goats, to basically a tenth of the male to female, so that they can mate. 200 ewes and 20 rams. So it's the same thing with these rams. The ewes and the rams are the male and the female and the male over here. And then he sends 30 milch camels with their colts. So he basically sends camels with all their little kids that those 30 camels had. 40 kine. I don't even know what a kine is. 10 bulls, 20 she asses, and 10 foals. So you can see he sends a whole bunch of stuff, a big group of animals, a whole lot of animals. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants. Every drove by themselves. And you see how he sends them all kind of single, drove by a time, drove after drove after drove. And pass over before me and put his space. So he's really doing this kind of like drove after drove is kind of funny because it reminds me of, if you remember, and I'm going to bring up this movie, the old cartoon movie, Aladdin. It really seems this is like when Aladdin enters into wherever it is that he's entering, and after he's found the genie. Um, this is kind of what Aladdin does. He sends all of his stuff, kind of like all these different types of, one at a time. He sends all he sends all the goats at once. He sends all the rams at once. He sends all the colts and the kine at once. All these different 10 bulls. He's sending them all in different groups, but the different groups are kind of walking in a straight single file line, but they're all separated. And he of course in that movie he's doing a whole little cartoon dance and singing and everything. And he's coming in, but he's making a big show of it. And of course, when Aladdin shows up, the little Jasmine woman, she's not really impressed because she's saying that's like what everybody does. You guys are just, showing all the stuff that you have. And so that's kind of what he's doing here. He's trying to show, he's being kind of dual minded, where he's not only is he thinking about his protection, he's also thinking about pleasing his brother Esau. So trying to be, so he's really trying to, hopefully Esau isn't mad at him. He's hopefully he's for his life. He's praying to God for his life over here. So he's really concerned that Esau might kill everybody. And he just isn't prepared to be doing any war right now. He's really with his family and a whole bunch of children is really what he's got right now. He doesn't have an army. Esau has an army. So he's really just concerned that there's nothing he's really going to be able to do if Esau attacks them. That's what he's concerned about. But no, he kind of makes his entrance where he delivers all of these every drove by themselves. So he's sending all these different a whole bunch of groups of different animals, a whole bunch of different droves, sending them by themselves, probably sending one servant with all of these animals or a couple of servants just to handle them. 200 goats, 20 he goats, there's just little groups like that. And the reason why he's doing it, though, not only is he making a show of his entrance to say, look, I'm rich, please, he's really trying to show him, look how rich I am, don't kill me, we could, I got a bunch of stuff I'm giving you, and I would like to find favor in your eyes. And on top of that, he's doing it just in case, who knows, if Esau starts attacking them real quick, at least he's got plenty of time and space in between them to pull back and run away, So he's testing them with every single drove, and he's hoping that eventually, he's got plenty of time to see, well, is Esau going to hurt any of these? Is he going to kill any of these animals? Just, is he going to show anger towards any of these droves? And it doesn't look like he does, though. So, but that's what he's telling him. He sends them, and he tells them, with everybody that you come across, every time you come across him, tell him it's a present for Esau, and it comes from Jacob, and Jacob is behind us. So that's what he's really telling all these guys, all his servants that are coming in different droves. So it's a bunch of different groups of people going kind of like one after another, with different presents. And they've got different droves. And so he's got plenty of time to check out if he gets attacked, he can start running away. So let's see. And also tell him that when you run into him, tell him that Jacob is behind us. And for he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me. And afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. And so that's why he's saying, I will see his face. I'll get to see how he starts acting on the way up to these droves. Uh, and then so went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. So he's waiting to see what happens. And then he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 men servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok. So now he's going overnight for some reason. He wakes up, and overnight they pass over the ford. They go over this ford Jabbok. So they go over this. I'm not entirely sure where this is. Let me see. This ford Jabbok might be part of this. So where was he? This Mahanaim. So it could have been maybe around this Jordan River. It did say that he separated them and went across the Jordan River. Remember? So that's what I do remember reading that. What is it? That he's become 2 people and he's crossed over the Jordan. So that he forged something right here. So overnight, and maybe he goes overnight either probably because it was easier. Once again, that's just where he's smart. He's the when he was praying to God, he was praying and thanking him for the truth that he had been given. And that truth was, oh yeah, well at night the river goes down pretty low, and it's low enough that you guys you can walk across it and get a bunch of stuff across it. So that's what he probably knew. That it was just probably easier to hey, all day long, there's a tide that comes in and the river's pretty high, but come night it actually drains pretty low, and you can go across it. And maybe that's what he knew, or maybe it was to hide himself. He could have also been thinking that he could take some cover in the middle of the night. But let me keep reading to find out and get some more, see what it is. But he takes him overnight, and they go, and he took him over the brook and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone. So you see, he sends he sends them all across over that night. But he comes back, right? And he's kind of there by alone. And there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. So now this is a kind of another thing that he does. Basically, he takes his family, all the women and children and all his sons, and they go across the river, right? But it looks like he kind of sent them away while he himself stays up front. Right, so he stays up in the front line to see what's going to happen, but he sends his family kind of to the back and across the river to give them some space. So now what he's got is he's basically got the droves of what's considered the gifts, all of his gifts. So he does got all the gifts up front, and he's sending them in droves, kind of like line. It's a big line of them, kind of like I said, if you remember that movie, Aladdin, when he's making his entrance into the city. And he's already met with the genie, and he's already got he's already the prince. Prince Aladdin is what he's introducing himself as, and he's basically coming in with all of his stuff, and that's showing everything that he's got. And that seems to be what's going on here, but it's also a military where he's really thinking, of his safety over here, the safety of his family. But all night long, after he does this, he takes his family across, and he's there by himself, and there he wrestles with the man until the breaking of the day. So here's just this random kind of story, but it's not entirely random when you remember that at the very beginning. So we're in Genesis. So this is 24 is when we start seeing where he fights with this angel. So very beginning, Genesis, 31, 32, 1 and 2, it talks about he on his way. So even on his way up here, before, on his way from this place, Mitzpah to Mahanaim, somewhere around this way, he came across these angels, right? So it makes and that's when he finally comes, and when he gets there, that's why he calls that place Mahanaim. So that's where he's actually at. So he came across these angels earlier in the chapter in the very same spot that he's still at. So he's still in this Mahanaim, and that's where he came across the angels, and he's still there. So he crosses the river right around here, and that's where he sends his family over. And then when he's kind of sending them on the backside, uh, so there he is, um, by himself, and I guess on his way back or something, there he is. He's wrestles with a man all night. Like there's just some strange guy, and he's potentially somebody that's he just comes against him. And he comes to fight with him, and that man is kind of fighting with him all night. But that man, this stranger, that strange man that we don't, once again, he sees that he's not gonna beat, he's not gonna beat Jacob. Jacob is got a lot of fight in him, So that's what this is like, and so this is what we're seeing, that this is an encounter with God. So this is again, remember that hidden man from Genesis 2. We're remembering just like Abraham met Melchizedek. How did Abraham meet Melchizedek? Well, Abraham met Melchizedek when, after he had finished saving Lot, like the invading Babylon army came in, and then after Abraham goes out and he kills them, he smotes them, he with the help of God. He just like how Jacob had just earlier prayed in this chapter. Remember when he's praying in this chapter back at around verse 9? When he's praying, he's saying, I'm not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth. And that's why that story back from Genesis 30, when he's talking about how he made his his little policy. Remember, I call it the policy. It's his policy by wherefore he got rich. And it's in Genesis 30. And basically it comes around when what was it that he would do? He would set, let's see, chapter 30, verse, basically there's a few of them, 38, 37, from verse 37 on down, where he's talking about he makes the rods, and basically what he was doing was making, and I don't know what they're called. I know I've seen them, but basically it looks like it makes it easier for when the females are trying to drink water, that the males can kind of come up behind them and mate with them a lot easier. They just, while these cattle are kind of stuck in there. And then when the females get pregnant, later on they're gonna have children, and they're gonna have pregnant. They're gonna have. He would basically make it to where he would put up like a fencing area probably, and make it a nice area that they knew that they could go there, and they'd be penned up and kept away. And people, they'd be safer in this little like pen, for example. So it was like he's making a pen area, and so they knew when they saw these one around the trough, the men knew, the males knew they could go uh, get the females, mate with the females, and then when the females saw those other types, the little pens, they knew they can go in there and have the baby, and they'd be a lot safer than having the baby wherever they were just at, out in the open field. So that's what Jacob was doing, and this was his intelligence. And it was the same kind of thing when we come across back in Genesis 14, when back in Genesis 14 is the same time when Abraham meets Melchizedek, and there's a whole big war. And remember that we see right here, Abraham, Genesis 14 and 15, Abraham hears about Lot being taken captive, and where does he go? He pursues him up into Dan. And look, that's another concept, because Dan is all the way right here at this Mitzpah. So we're seeing how far Abraham had gone when we think about it. And Mitzpah was close to Dan, and on his way down here, we see Jacob having to think about wars. So there's something about this area that's kind of bringing upon a war, apparently. But Abraham was smart enough, and he divides himself. And look, even he divides himself. So he's making a division. So that's kind of interesting. He's making a division here, just like, and it's kind of in the same area, and that's interesting. I find that interesting. Something I'm just coming across right now. But Abraham knew to divide himself, and he divides himself, and he kills them by night, right? So he goes out there by night and he kills the enemy by night. And this was also something that when he comes across Melchizedek, he attributes his, they attribute his right here. And blessed be the Most High, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. So you see that Abraham gave tithes to this Melchizedek, and they both agree. Everybody was in agreement that, oh yeah, it was God that gave me my enemies, and God was able to be the one that did this. And then he gave tithes to Melchizedek, right? So we're hearing at this prayer, remember this, that he's talking about he's telling God that deliver me, remember, and I'll give everything. And remember, he's the same God that he's telling he's gonna pay a tithe to. And then we see here in the middle of the night, just in the same night, he divides his, in the middle of the night, he divides his encampment in two. So in the middle of the night is when he sends his children and his wives across this river over there. So it's kind of interesting. You're seeing how he's really thinking like a military. He's got a military mind right now. Is what he's thinking like a military mind, just like Abraham. And so all night long, this is God comes out to him and he sees, and that's why he's fighting with this man. So over here, 23. He took in the middle of the night. It's very reflective of what happened with Abraham. You get what I'm saying? Basically, he's got some military in his mind, and he thinks, go at night. So it could be either A, maybe it was easier to cross at night, or B, he didn't want to be seen. He didn't want anybody to be seen that he was sending all those people across that back way. It's one of these things, but God is really comes up to him, and he sees, like, that's why God comes and wrestles with him. He's really testing him, like, as a king, like he's really testing him with his military mind is what he's doing right here. And so all night long that man comes up, and that man is fighting with Jacob, and that man eventually says, I'm not going to beat you. Looks like I'm not going to beat you. So not as a man. So he touches the hollow of his thigh, which is like right around, I guess, your thigh, the hollow of your thigh. And all of a sudden Jacob's thigh was out of joint, and he wrestled with him. So that's kind of interesting that all night long he's fighting with him as a man. But then at the end of it, when he says, oh, it looks like as a man, I'm not going to beat you. So he does something, supernatural, and he touches the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of, you see what I'm saying? So while they're wrestling all night, this man, which is, like I said, I'm proposing it to be Melchizedek, and that's why it really reflects this Abraham story. That what's going on is this is Melchizedek he's running into, and that's why he calls him God. I ran into God. But Melchizedek is acting like a man over here, and then he does something supernatural, and then he says, let me go, for the day breaketh. And so this is Melchizedek, more than likely, this is Melchizedek, and he tells him, let me go. I'm going, for the day breaks. And Jacob tells him, no, I will not go unless you bless me. So he knows that this guy is somebody, you're somebody supernatural. We were fighting all night, and then you did something supernatural to cheat, not to cheat, but to show me that you showed me that you could have done that all along. Why didn't you do that all along? Now bless me, is what he's saying. He's recognizing that this is, who are you, And he says, so this guy says, what is your name? And Jacob tells him, my name is Jacob. And so then this figure, which, like I said, is more than likely Melchizedek, and he says, your name is no longer Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and has prevailed. So he's telling them right here, this is something Israel. You're gonna call yourself Israel. And I guess Israel's got a name, and it's something like he wrestles with God, or he fights with God, or God fights. It's kind of I'm not entirely sure what it is. I think God fights is the one that I remember the most as probably being the one that it is. God fights. So he tells them, you're going to be called Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and has prevailed. So he's calling them, you're like a prince, for because like as a prince, you have power with God. And this man is calling himself God. So this is, like I said, this would be, in this time, this is Melchizedek. Before before Jesus Christ is given with the promise. Before Jesus Christ comes into the picture, and Jesus Christ is coming from the same line of Melchizedek. So he's this the same Melchizedek is got the authority of God here, and so that's why he's really reflective of Jesus Christ, because this is the kingship that it comes from. He's a king and a priest of Melchizedek, of the line of Melchizedek. And Melchizedek, we're seeing, is like I said, I had made mention when he came across Abraham that he was probably very bright. He was a very bright man. Like he was literally, he could have very well been like made out of light, and he was something about him that he was obvious that he was the true king appointed by God. Like he was the king that was appointed by God, and he was the priest appointed by God on the earth at that time. And so Abraham definitely recognized that. And Jacob over here, however, is fighting with a man that's clearly a man that that Jacob had no problem thinking that he could deal with, and he did fight with him all night. But then at the end of it, he does something with his thigh, and he does something supernatural, and that's why he probably has him in some sort of a hold. And then he's saying, "I'm not gonna let go of you until you bless me," and that's why this guy renames him, and he's claiming to be God. This man is claiming to be God because you've wrestled with God and with men, and you have prevailed. So he's telling them. So just he's telling them, look, you got a lot of power with you. Now, never mind just that you got your family with you. You can be a fighter too. You can do this. You can be a fighter. Because right now we're thinking, Jacob's got this mindset that I'm going to be destroyed because we're just a bunch of women and children. Me and my women and my children. We're just going to be destroyed. But God is telling them, no, you got it. You could be a military guy if you need to. You fought with me all night long, and I was acting like a man. And then it wasn't until so you're just as strong as any man out there, is what he's telling them. You're just as strong as any man out there, and you've also seen God, and you've quarried with earlier in the chapter he saw the angels. So you've seen, and now he's telling them that this guy just happens to be God. This is that more than likely it's the Melchizedek character. So so he's meeting Melchizedek, and he doesn't really recognize it. And then so Jacob asked him and said, "Tell me, I pray thee, thy name." And he said, "Wherefore is it thou dost ask after my name?" And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of that place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Penuel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. So he was like limping after this engagement. Um, and that's why it tells us that the children of Israel eat not the sinew which shrank. So apparently, this leads to something that they don't eat on the hollow of the thigh. So that's something I'm not familiar with. I've heard stories that everybody's got like a weird sinew right there too. So I don't know what that's all about, but I'm not entirely sure what this comes from. But that is Moses writing that. And what's going on here too is what we see, like I said, is that this is when he asks him. Jacob says, "What's your name?" And this guy says, "Why are you asking my name?" And like I said, more than likely this is Melchizedek. And why is this Melchizedek? And why is he telling him, "Why are you even asking me that? You should already know," is what he's telling him. And he's basically, it would be Abraham's story. So there, God is really testing them, because what he's telling them is that, hey, you guys need to remember your history. You guys, this family needs to know its history, because I am going to do things for all of humanity through your history. And you need to keep your history so that everybody in the future knows about it. And this is where he's really getting into it and telling them. And that's why he's testing them like this. And so that's why he's asking them, "You should already know who I am." He goes, who are you? And he goes, "I just claim to be God. And then you saw me do something supernatural. And now I'm blessing you, and I'm changing your name into Israel." And so he's really saying, well, who are you? Well, how many gods do you got? Is what he's asking him right there. Why do you ask after my name? How many gods do you got? You're over here talking about you're gonna pay me a tithe. Who did Abraham pay tithes to? Melchizedek. Then that's who you should know who this is. So that's why he's telling them that's what this is all about. That's what that is. And I know a lot of people don't recognize that fact, I think, but that's what's going on in this particular story when he fights with God, and then he tells them, who else do you think? How many other gods do you got? And who else is standing? Who else is the man that you pay tithes to on behalf of God? It's Melchizedek, is what he's telling them. This is Melchizedek. And Melchizedek is acting like a man now, even though Abraham probably noticed him to be completely, something. He recognized that when Abraham went to go pray elsewhere, he was praying to, and that his act of prayer was an act of righteousness, and Melchizedek was that king of righteousness, and so Melchizedek was the one listening to the prayers. So Melchizedek is this person, like I said, and we learn in Hebrews 7, 1 through 3 or something, where he talks about how Melchizedek, how do I put it? Melchizedek was without lineage, without mother, without father. So that's this man right here. This man that's been walking around, he's been walking around Israel. He's been doing as he pleases amongst Israel. And so they're in this ride around Mahanaim. And if you remember, in Shechem is where Abraham had seen God, and then in Bethel is where he prayed to God, and then he came back later on, and it was out in this right around Salem over here, that in that valley over there, that he comes across Melchizedek and realizes that it's Melchizedek that is this guy. He's recognizing, oh, Melchizedek is the same figure that has come to me as God. But in man, he's coming in as Melchizedek, but when he's God, God is saying that Melchizedek is the very same person. That him and Melchizedek are the same authority figure over here, is what he's telling them. And meanwhile, other people might think of this as many gods, because that's why we're being told the stories in chapter 31 about the idolatry that's already going on. So Laban was probably thinking, there's a bunch of different gods. And so when they come to their little covenant at the end, Laban is probably trying to tell him about his favorite gods. Let me tell you about my favorite God that we should make a covenant with. But they come to some understanding that Jacob wouldn't swear by these other gods. It was only by the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and their father. So they shared this one common God, and Jacob is really devout to that one God and that one God alone. Whereas Laban knew of that God, but he also had other gods that he was faithful to, apparently. But so between the two of them, they come to that agreement that that's the God we're gonna swear by. And so Laban's like, fine, that's the one we're gonna swear by. I know that God. He's not my favorite God, maybe, but since you're so devout to him, Jacob, I guess we'll do it to that God and that God alone. And so that's why he's getting into that story that now over here, Jacob is recognizing the fact that every time we see you, God, you always kind of look a little bit different. I mean, every time you're noticeable, there's supernatural things around you. So things that could only be possible because out of in the supernatural realm is being attributed to God. But here he is seeing God as a man, and it isn't until a little later on that suddenly this man does something supernatural and touches the hollow of Jacob's thigh, that we read that Jacob is recognizing, oh wow, so you're God again, right? This is God, because this guy's claiming to be God. And so he tells him, well, what's your name? God. And that's why God's telling him, like, how many gods do you got? There's only one God. Remember that. I come to you how I come to you. He goes, you've wrestled, you got, and that's why he tells him, let me see, what does he tell him? I've got, when he calls him Israel, he says, but Israel, for as a prince has thou power with God and with men. and has prevailed. So that's what he's telling him. He's saying, you're no longer Jacob, you're Israel, because I'm God, and you, like a mighty prince, you're acting like a very mighty prince over here. Because remember, Abraham was like a king, and he was talking about him in Kings, and he's talking about now this guy, he's a prince, and a prince becomes a king. So keep that in mind. So he's telling Jacob, and that's why he's calling him Israel, and he's crowning him. He's really giving him like a little crown here by changing his name, calling him Jacob. Now Jacob is Israel, and he's saying, he's calling, because you're basically like a prince, and you've got power with God, and you've got power with men, and you've prevailed in your life. So that's why Jacob asked him, well, what's your name, God? And he's telling him, you should already know my name. There's only one God. Why do you ask after my name? So that's why Jacob is saying, wow, he calls this place Peniel. I don't know what that means, but because I've seen God face to face and my life is preserved, and I didn't die. He could have killed me, but he didn't kill me. And so, but he still had a limp. Look, he still goes about the rest. He's got a limp. So something happened where he's got that limp to remember that God still did have authority over him. And so they don't even eat this, like I said, but it really has a story to tell you. The story is there's only one God. Who could I possibly be? Well, it's got to be Melchizedek, in the form that God has given Melchizedek for the purpose that he has given unto Melchizedek, if that makes sense. But that was Genesis 32. I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. That was chapter 32. I'll get into chapter 33 in a different video, but like I said, before I leave, I'll do what I normally say. Please like the video. If you're watching this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and then God bless you, and I pray that we all bless Jesus Christ, and may Jesus Christ bless all of us. Amen.